aim to have Fatmata Claire Carlton Hansels, Executive Director at Legal Aid Board. She will make her way shortly to the studio. And already we have Bami Sise, who's the Assistant Director, Ministry of Gender and Children's Affairs. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and to share our remarkable progress in achieving gender equality in Sierra Leone.
And on Zoom, we do have Professor Alhaji Njai, who's a Pan-Africanist. Of course, he would also be lending his voice to the conversation. But I'll start off with you, Bami. You know, every year, International Women's Day, as we celebrate it, there are always beautiful speeches, high-profile events to celebrate women. But bringing it to the context of Sierra Leone, for the average Sierra Leonean woman, whether it's the market woman, whether it's a struggling graduate or a single mother, how do these all translate into real change for these women in Sierra Leone?
Thank you very much. It's a great question. We celebrated International Women's Day on Saturday, March 8, 2025. And the celebration was indeed a milestone event where we had the Vice President of the Republic of Sierra Leone to deliver a powerful keynote address. And most importantly, his address was a defining moment because we saw where he reaffirmed government's commitment in advancing gender equality and women's empowerment in Sierra Leone. We also had powerful statements from the Honorable Minister of Gender and Children's Affairs, Dr. Ayata Mahoy. And other distinguished guests were also present for the celebration, like the Ambassador of Ireland, the British High Commissioner, the Chief Minister, the Presidential Advisor on Gender, and many more other distinguished guests. All of their statements, their speeches were all powerful, and to me, it's underscore the importance of collaboration among stakeholders to ensure we're able to promote gender equality and empower women within our space. We also have the event featured musical performances by musical female artists. And of course, there were also exhibition show around showcasing women talents. You know, we have women who are talented in various fields. So they were all out there exhibiting what they can do, what their skills are. So for me, it's a powerful day, and it was a resounding success for Sierra Leone, where we recognize the contributions of women, what they have been doing, what are the progress we have made. Let me just give you a quick overview. We are a state party to the Beijing Declaration Platform for Action, the BDFPA. And since we signed that document in 1995 to now, it's 30 years, not 30 days. It means 3 good decades. And a lot of progress have been made so far in Sierra when it comes to women's empowerment, when it comes to gender equality. So for Sierra Leone, the theme resonates what we have been doing as our achievements and milestone. And the theme for this year, International Women's Day, says rights for all women and girls, empowerment, equality. It's more or less want to showcase what we have done in the areas of rights for women, in the areas of rights for our girls. What have we done to empower women? So it's a huge success where we were able to achieve a good number of things. And the question one wants to ask, what next after the celebration, like you just asked?
Just before we go to what next, let's go back to the celebration. And you mentioned having all these statements. What was key amongst them?
It's the issue of empowering women. It's the issue to create a space where we promote gender equality.
Do we have the space in Sierra Leone already?
Yes, we do have. And it's about intensifying, it is about creating more spaces so that women will feel empowered, so that their voices will be heard.
When we talk about that space, is it just for formal women? Because when we also zoom into the GWE Act, which is one of the visual or practical commitment that government had made, and we've seen it come into play. But there are also challenges when it comes to the undermention of informal women when it comes to either access to finance and the likes. So when you talk about this space, are informal women as well as the formal women are they included or considered?
Well, it is an inclusive space. So whether informal or formal women, they're all inclusive. That is why the groundbreaking legislation, the UWI Act, covers every woman in this country. So whether you are in the informal sector or you're in the formal sector, it is a must to ensure women have access to financial services. It is a must to ensure we're able to empower women.
I was just looking through the theme for 2024, which speaks to accelerating gender equality through economic empowerment. What was achieved before even talking of the theme for 2025?
Yes, we have a number of women who benefited from a lot of economic empowerment programs. Yeah, you have some loan schemes, you have some economic empowerment programs, such as giving microcredit to women. You know, as a government, we always collaborate with other institutions to ensure we're able to cater. So before now, I mean, there is a huge benefit from women across the country. They're able to access those services and be able to invest the money received and be able to keep themselves and their families.
Just as Elizabeth which gears towards transforming the lives of women and girls across the country. But minimal attention is being paid to most of those fine provisions in that act, one of which speaks to, of course, finances for women. I think them having opportunity to get finances in these microfinance institutions. But most of what we see nowadays, the attention is being paid to politics, 30% quota, so to speak. It seems minimal was achieved with the 2024 theme.
Well, I would not say the achievement was minimal. What I would tell you here is the fact that...
How many programs did government created for women in even achieving that particular thing? Because one of the many programs one will talk of is that of Munafa Fund, which can't even take the women from here to this to wherever they want to see themselves.
Yes, I agree with you. As a ministry, we also have some programs that provide loan scheme to women. You know, there was a project we were handling in the ministry where we piloted in Bo and other places where monies were given to women as microcredits. At the end of the day, they were able to invest this money and in a way that they were able to take care of their families. So it's a whole lot, but I think it's a bit by bit we'll get there as time goes on.
Would you be able to give us a data of how many women actually benefited from some of these microfinance schemes?
It varies. I cannot give you a specific number now here in terms of number of beneficiaries who benefited from some of those financial schemes. It varies. But what I would tell you is that most women benefited from those programs.
There are still empirical evidences as to the obstacles that women do face, more so in terms of them achieving equal participation across every other aspects. Have we achieved the required success in that area? See, particularly, so let's go back to finance. We've seen instances wherein when a woman wants to go for finance, they'll ask, do you have a husband? Will you bring your husband? Just so that we'll, of course, will be assured that the monies will be paid back, among many other things. We still have those instances in Sierra Leone.
Yes, I totally agree with you. That has been the normal situation and that has been the normal trend. And that is why in the UWI Act, what we did was we made a provision in the Act that speaks towards access to finances for women. And we also mandated the Ministry of Gender and Children's Affairs to work with Bank of Sierra Leone and other financial institutions to ensure Ministry of Finance, for example, they regulate these financial institutions and Bank of Sierra Leone so that they provide procedures that are flexible for women to access some of these loans. Because the normal trend is women go for these loans. I mean, the conditions attached to these loans it's crazy. Mm-hmm. Looking at high interest rates, which to me is not good for women because you cannot have the services available. And when they go for the services, the interest rate is crazy for them. You know. So what we did was to ensure the Bank of Sierra Leone, Ministry of Finance regulate procedures. We forced them to ensure the conditions conditions are flexible for women. You cannot say for a woman to have a loan, I mean, the woman should come with a collateral, a house book, for example, or you say to provide some fact about, I mean, her husband. It's undone. It's unfair to women. So what we are saying in our regulation, because after the enactment of the law, we also develop regulation that explains how the act should be, I mean, implemented. So in the regulation, it is clearly stated that, I mean, conditions should be flexible and you have to call movable collateral, which means, for example, if I am a woman and I need some amount of money for loan, and I have something with me that is movable, that suffices the amount of money that I want, the bank should be able to provide me the loan amounts. So it makes it easier for women, it makes the condition very much flexible.
All right, we'd like to bring in Professor Njai as well to join in the conversation. And generally, you know, all over the world, people still call out for gender equality. And let's get the African perspective. When it comes to gender inequality, it's not just a legal issue, but you know, culture also plays a deep role. Now, in our societies, wherein traditions still shape to a large extent the policies that we have, what role do you think African countries, inclusive of Sierra Leone, can play to see that, you know, these cultural norms evolve and we still have women who would come into a space wherein their voices are known and we can have gender equality?
Thank you very much for having me this morning, and happy Women's Day to all of you. I think I wrote a piece, a very short piece, during on Saturday, addressing the whole aspect of women and International Women's Day and women's liberation. And I think often we have allowed some narratives around gender that are based on Western neoliberal narratives. And we have allowed ourselves to kind of fall victims to this type of narratives of gender. And we keep walking against those narratives. And oftentimes to not much of a great success in our own environment when it comes to issues of gender. Let me take a step back for people to understand when it comes to gender, woman and man within our African context. In traditional Africa, the woman is the custodian of the land. In most traditional cultures, the woman is the custodian of the land, the custodian of the fire, custodian of water. The only thing in traditional African setting that God held was air. Why are they custodians of land? Custodians of land, the women control production systems in traditional Africa. And up till today, agriculture is largely women who control it, production. Why are they custodians of fire? Energy systems are largely revolves around women. And women in traditional Africa have always been the custodians of those. And then why are they custodians of water? Well, continuity of life is critical, and water is that droplet, and women are critical in that in every population to allow us to continue the population continuity of life. So women in traditional African settings have a very powerful place. So the issue of gender we talk about today, we must understand what created the imbalance. And that imbalance that created continues on today, and we are addressing symptoms of the imbalance rather than addressing the true fundamental causes of the imbalance in gender. So how did we get to a point today that men are in, in much more places, in dominant places. Men are doing policy, men are in charge. How did you get to that?
Professor
Well, we
Njai.
must go back. We must go back to things like colonialism. How did colonialism come to places like traditional Africa and disrupted our status quo? That status quo that I had already explained.
Professor
Now,
Njai.
when we talk about gender empowerment, let's look at Sierra Leone as a context. A country like Sierra Leone. And almost all of us, including myself, were educated by a woman who never went to school. Check every other person, including potentially the president, go to them and ask them who educated them. It will have been maybe a mother who didn't go to school or a dad who didn't. And then we turn around and say, these people are not empowered.
But again, Professor Njai,
let me go back again to something. Let me get finished.
Professor Njai,
then
quickly.
we go back.
How do you think
Hello?
this gap, this long existing gap, could be closed?
Because we would need to kind of decolonize and begin to think about gender in a much more different dimension than the way it is currently portrayed. So for instance, when we had colonialism, men went to school, women didn't go to school. So many of the technical areas were actually men who did study those. And then women were, even if they go to school, they were relegated to being administrators and maybe secretaries in offices and all that. So when we look at, say, water, for instance, that is important for women, how many water engineers do we have that are women? How many water scientists do we have that are women? When we talk about forestry, women are the important custodians of the forest. How many women are, forestry managers or, specialize in these areas? When we talk about the issues today, look at the issues of water scarcity in Freetown. Who are the victims of these issues? The women. And the women suffer sometimes from musculoskeletal issues, a lot of issues, back pain, a lot of problems associated by just carrying water on their head. But this construct needs to be deliberately and intentionally changed, not by just necessarily having days of celebration, slogans, and all that things, but there has to be an active process. It has to be an active process where we are deliberate and intentional in saying women have to be capacitated in these other areas, and then also the areas that we have called traditional, that we are relegated to the back, we have to bring them up to the forefront. For instance, now we say women have to be in the house and taking care of children, right? But let me say, if we now put a monetary value to that, right? We are now paying them. We are doing something with regards to a monetary value in raising kids. You think men will not do that job? Men will want to do it because you have now elevated it to a level where it is no longer in that back burner. It's no longer seen as a job that women will only do. If you say cooking, you put something to it, you monitor, you elevate it, the value of it, men will do it because it is no longer relegated to something women will just do. Let's take something like carpentry. In every household, the women will decide the furniture in the house, the bed, the furniture, everything in the house. But how many women carpenters do we have? These are ways in which we need to kind of decolonize our minds around gender, but also being deliberate and intentional in building the capacity of women to become much more relevant and much more powerful in what they do. When you tell me this activism, we need to have more women on the table. We need to have them more on the table. But you bring women to the table sometimes just as numbers, because you are not capacitating them to such that when they get to that table, they can now shift the policies. They can now make the rightful decisions. So you have to first create the situation where you are capacitating them. And I'll go back again and tell you, when you think of women empowerment in Africa, we must focus on the Africana womanism rather than the Western aspect of feminism. African societies are largely built around community, and in that community, the family is at the center of it. The family-centered structure is at the unit. The family is a single unit in African systems. And Western feminism is about individualism. It's about the person-centered, the person, the individual. And so when we begin to talk about feminism in Africa, and we go to the point of breaking down family unit into individual unit, we are destroying the very core of what the African value systems and communal systems stand for. For instance,
I cannot agree. I cannot agree less. But again, when you say empowerment, it cuts across various folds. Let's talk of health. How underfunded or underprioritized are issues having to do with women's health in the country? Or would you say massive progress has been achieved in that regard?
Well, these things cut across. You see, when you look at much of our fundamental issues, post-colonial, in the independent thing, it cuts across. The important issues is that in the post-colonial state, we have failed massively, whether it is food security, whether it's decolonizing things, whether it is healthcare, whether it is eradicating poverty or removing it. We have failed in every sector. And so because of that, it has been a sort of a dependency a component that has become part of our systems. So what has happened? We have failed. Poverty has entrenched to the point that we now shift the burden heavily. That burden that was already there, we shifted heavily now to even women to continue to do more and more and more. And with even more effects on their own health and their own well-being, because they have to, do more and more to be able to take care of the family and the family structure and keeping that in place. So again, it is a component of how we, as a body politic, have failed in the post-colonial in terms of minimizing and removing aspects of poverty and ensuring that everyone in the population have an opportunity for better well-being, for standards, for quality of life, and a lot more. And I think what needs to, when I go back again, what I'm going back again is to begin to really give people a perspective of our before colonialism and even now, for us to begin understand that gender empowerment or issues of women being in places has been an important aspect in our societies, and the dysfunctionality and breakdown of a lot of things happen during colonialism and in our post-colonial state. And some of those things are what we are now seeing worsening and worsening and worsening. For instance, how did we get the Madame Yokos? How did we get Queen Masariko, who led the Mani invasion, all-women army that led the Mani invasion, the precursor to some of the Mende people in Southeast? Queen Masariko, Queen Simbakwe. These were all powerful women army. How do we have all of those in our cultures? How do we have the Nanas in Ghana? You know, women were in power in Africa way before America ever experienced women in their own democratic systems. America only allowed women and black people to vote in 1960. So I think what we have to do is to go back to looking at how did we achieve equality and empowerment, you know, and not to kind of indict our own cultures and then use an external culture as a source of validation. This is my argument. So we have to now go back and address our issues from how we can sustainably find solutions that are sustainable within the ambient of our own environment. Because what is happening now? Most of the solutions we are facing are being sponsored from outside. When that donor funding goes, it goes away. It does.
Njai,
if it's a policy we are developing, the policy is being funded by USAID or America, or EU.
Professor Njai, just before we come back to Bami in the studio, you've mentioned quite a number of things, and when we go back, as you've just mentioned, it doesn't take away the fact as well that there was a point in time wherein women as well were left behind. You talk about capacitating women, and that's because for a long period of time, you know, there's been this gap where women are not empowered and not capacitated. So when it gets to a point where a space is created, as you've said, sometimes it's just about numbers. You have a lot of women who will show up, who will occupy spaces, but then what can they deliver? So in our case as Sierra Leone, how do we get past this challenge?
So we have to, as a country, go back to being deliberate and intentional in terms of ensuring that women and girls are empowered across the board. And it is not just through education. You see, the focus in our current discourse has been education, or basically school. Let's single out school. Take girls to school, that's the empowerment. When they don't learn book, they don't empower. And we are forgetting that part of the empowerment can also be very cultural. It can be cultural. It can be empowering the culture as well, empowering their social dynamics, empowering the environment around them, and then, you know, creating enabling situations that allows for that. For instance, you know, when I sit at Leicester and I see in the morning we have a water crisis in Freetown, who is going to go and fetch water in the morning a lot more will be the girls, the young girls. Who are spending more time doing that are the young girls. And then by the time they finish, how much time do they have to go to school? And maybe even when they are doing that, they may fall under sexual assault or issues or many other stuff. How do we ensure that there is water services in Freetown, that a young girl doesn't have to do that, so in the morning they have more time to go to school? How do we ensure that our environment around Freetown, our trees, our forests are not being deforested? We are not removing all the trees and creating a drought situation in Freetown, which creates an avenue where women and girls have to walk further than where they live to go get water and spend more time because of acute water stress. How do we create that enabling environment? You see, this is a discourse. It is women. The issue of gender is not an issue of in isolation or in a vacuum. You know, I was in Kigali a couple of days ago, and I was asked, I was addressing African ministers, and I said, we normally talk about thinking out of the box in Africa, but we are still in the box. How do you think out of the box while you are still in the box? So we don't think of all the important things. When we talk about our mothers are suffering in the village, our girls are suffering in the village, yet we don't think about the fact that capitalism, global capitalism, is making sure that their onions, their potato, and everything that they are growing is not profitable anymore because they cannot make money out of it, because now it can just be imported into country. And so a mother in the farm who was going to get some money from that potato in the farm can no longer get that. And so
Dr. Njai,
the suffering that they are suffering is not necessarily, because a man has done it or anything has done it within our system. It is because of a structural global economic systems that have impacted them and everything they do.
Dr. Njai, so this is a question I'll also ask Bami. But again, when we talk of empowerment, it's one side of the argument. Another will tell you, even the women themselves, most times they hardly believe in themselves, talk less of their colleague women who hardly believe in them. Where do you think the problem lies? It's very clear in Sierra Leone. At some point in time, we've seen a lot of women who've shown up in politics, but their colleagues hardly believe in them. They hardly believe in them.
Well, it's natural sometimes. It's also an issue that also affects even men and even us Africans. For us Africans, we've developed over time a culture of self-hate. And so when you put us against a white person, for the most part, even if you are very good, they say, because na black man is not so good. And so over the years of oppression, and among women has also created this thing of self-doubt among that the woman is not capable of leading, because over time we've just had men, because again of these structural issues that I've explained over the years. My mother, for instance, very powerful woman, strong woman. She put all of us to school. Never in a single day went to school, right? Put all of us to school. Put my brother. We all professors now. We all doing great. She never did letter A. She was taken out of school, and my uncle, her elder brother, went to school, and her elder brother became first diplomat in Guinea and became minister under Sekou Touré, became all those things, and they became strong decision makers. But again, what we have to understand that because of this, now women begin to look up to men, because men were the ones who had the education. Men were the ones who now went to school, who had the stuff. Women begin to look up to them. And that imprinting continues down the line on many other women. And that self-doubt now arises such that when a woman stands up for something, the other woman will say, no, bo, my man therefore able to do this, you not go able to do this. So it's also the same way as when we tell a woman, a dark, beautiful young girl, we tell them, look where you black and you wawa. That way you look where you tell them, where you look where you black and wawa, what in that they create? They create an imprinting that they are not beautiful, their blackness is not beautiful, they don't look good. And that low self-esteem arises, so they have to go and look for harsh creams and begin to put harsh creams on their body, take out this beautiful melanin skin, this melanin that is gold, they take it out, and then they feel that the only way they have to look pretty, they have to look fairer. This is the self-doubt and low self-esteem that it's also psychological, that is part of our cultures that we've also ingrained from racism, from colonialism, from thinking around the intersectionality of these things. Gender is a very complex thing. It's not the way most people will think around it. There's a lot of intersectionality.
All right, still stay with us, Professor, and Jai will come back to Bami in the studio. Bami, you've been following up with the conversation, but I also want to bring in your ministry and the role that you play in terms of, also bringing boys and men into the conversation, especially when we talk about gender equality. And oftentimes we've seen a lot of issues when it comes to gender justice. But what role does your ministry also play in engaging boys and men? Because it's gender, it's not just based on a woman.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Thank you very much. I think one of the key milestones we have achieved over the years is the launch of the National Male Involvement Strategy. It is a document that speaks towards the involvement of both boys and men into the conversation, into the space. We realize that we cannot address gender imbalances, we cannot address issues around gender-based violence without the involvement of men and boys. Why? We notice that most of the cases when it comes to perpetrators of violence, they are men. Perpetrators of violence, they are boys. In most of the cases, this is practical. The evidences are there. So we cannot be talking about women, girls all the time if holistically want to address these issues. We recognize that there are internalized gender stereotypes. For example, this has been a serious problem where women internally have been socialized to believe that they are less intelligent, they cannot occupy leadership roles. These are cultural issues, these are cultural challenges. So we want to believe there are certain roles for community members that are not to be occupied by women, but for the boys and men. So having boys and men as allies will help a whole lot in terms of changing what we call positive masculinity, in terms of having respect for women. Because if you have men and boys into this space, they'll be able to advocate, they'll be able to push to promote gender equality, to talk on behalf of women. Because the problem also lies with the boys and men. They are the perpetrators. So having them into this space, then you are in a position to address the problem holistically.
In the studio, we now have Fatimata Claire Carlton Hansel. She's the Executive Director at Legal Aid Board. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning.
And happy International Women's Day
thank
to
you very much.
Now, your work at Legal Aid Board brings you face to face with victims of, whether it's gender violence and, domestic abuse, whether it's discrimination and the likes. Celebrating International Women's Day every other year, we've just mentioned seeing beautiful speeches, high-profile events, and the likes. But I'd like to bring it down to our legal system in Sierra Leone. Does it truly represent a change for women when it comes to these issues?
Well, it is very important that the United Nations and world bodies decided that there should be a day for women. Because wherever you have women, you have children. We have men say, hey, wait a minute, why don't they have a day for men? Because men are perceived and are known to be the stronger sex. When you're talking about gender or domestic violence, you're talking about who has more physical power, who has more sway in terms of the customary laws, the marriage laws, and all that. So it is very important for men and women to be able to realize that the future, their future or our future, lies in us treating each other and working side by side. Because you have some customary laws which really favor men. One man can marry as many wives under customary law. Under Islamic law, 4 wives. Under the general law, 1 wife. Under civil law, 1 wife. But then what we find out that in the home, how are responsibilities and duties distributed? So on International Women's Day, you're talking about stand up, accelerate action, the theme for this year, for gender equality. You're looking at how the home can be successful, how the office can be successful, how the government can be successful, how the country can be successful. Because you're dealing with the aspects of the largest percentage of the population in Sierra Leone, they are women. And wherever you call women, they are children. This is why Legal Aid Board sits in the heart of legal justice issues in Sierra Leone. We look at issues pertaining to women, to children. We look at issues pertaining also to men. But more importantly, we look at women and children. Because the stereotype man in Sierra Leone is somebody who does no chores at home, who sits down, crosses his legs, orders everybody around, eats the best meals, takes the best in everything, monopolizes even the remote control when he wants to watch his sports or anything. And at the end of the day, you have women and you have children. And if you consider that if you have a partner, when your boyfriend and girlfriend, oh, the partner is the best. When once you get married, the partner now becomes stupid, not serious, this and that, all sorts of things. But you forget that you are undermining your own self, your own income. Because if you put your wife on a good platform, or you put your partner on a good platform, and you encourage that partner to use her own God-given talents, even if it is to sell bread and butter, even if it's to do fruits, do other stuff. But when you do not empower your helpmate, this is why in all the holy books they say helpmate. They didn't say you went for a slave, or you went for a chattel, and all that. So if you empower your own kith and kin, your home is going to become stronger. Because the day you fall ill, your wife can be able to run the home. The income which you're bringing is also augmented by the other income coming in. But what do we see in our society? Gender-based violence, a lot of punishments at home meted out to wives, and that affects the children, and so on and so forth. So on International Women's Day, we are shedding light on these issues and making especially men realize that you're doing nobody but yourselves.
Do you still have an alarming rate of cases of either gender violence
Oh yes.
and the likes?
Oh yes. Oh yes. In addition to the sexual offences court, Legal Aid Board offices nationwide are full of women who say, let them not talk, say I don't care and go to court, I don't mind for go legal aid. And who bring all these issues. And a number of times, if you look at the police statistics, we have given legal aid to over 2 million Sierra Leoneans. And over 80% of those are women, and then children. In fact, we now have Rokel Bank for the past couple of years opened a branch in Legal Aid Board office for men who pay maintenance. Because some people, they tell you, madam, you don't give free education. Me, I know they pay maintenance. Say, so when the president said free quality education, the child should not have school bag, the child should not have good lunch, it is only the mother. And so for the first time, we are even empowering women to have accounts open, and men are paying in those accounts until those children are 18, until they leave school. We have lots of cases of domestic violence. If you continue nagging your wife, beating your wife, although in one or two instances they can tell you the wife is beating the husband, but those people, they don't come to complain. The husbands, once in a while you see them, but they don't come to complain. So, but the incidents, when you're talking of development in a country, you have to have people who are enlightened and who are ready to put forward their best footing in terms of income, in terms of education, in terms of rule of law, in terms of social life. Because when you develop each other, and these are some of the reasons, some men, they are always out of the house. Oh, me and my woman unable to talk. I'll rather have a girlfriend outside. So your resources end up going outside. Resources which should have helped you. In your old age, you start wondering, if I considered all that resources which went out, what I would have done with it, my God, maybe I'll have built houses. So it doesn't go far. This is why International Women's Day is very important.
Madam Mansils, before your arrival in the studio, we'll be talking around the landmark law which Sierra Leone has passed over time, which is that of the GWI Act. But even with such an act, one will say that gender inequality and, of course, denial of women's rights still seem very prevalent in Sierra Leone. Where are we getting it wrong? Is it a problem of sincerity?
Well, it's a combination of factors. When you're talking of the traditions, the tribal instinct, the things we have learned, the culture we have developed as a nation, there are a lot of good things. There are also a lot of bad ones. Because a culture which is very patrilineal, which is chauvinistic, in which even if the man is not doing anything, the man is supposed to be the head of the house. You have instances where you have women even selling at abacha. These women at the end of the month take their money, give a man who is not doing anything to go and pay the rents. And you have instances, men come home, they don't leave any money for maintenance or chop money, and they expect to eat very good meals, and at any point in time, they blame the woman for all their own pitfalls. And you have instances where marriages have become personality issues. Oh, you want to challenge me. And if you have that approach of thinking, the man does not even need to say much in a home. The man just needs to sit there, say what you have to say, and leave the woman. The women will always come back. But so I want to talk to men that some amount of mentoring and changing needs to take place. Nowadays, you see younger people, they tell you, oh, I know I'm married safe. I get for enjoy first. So the question is, where is our society going? And we're around to look at all these issues because our offices are always full. Either so a wife is coming whose husband wants to take another woman, or a husband dies, the relatives want to take the property, or somebody dies and then the wife is being maltreated, and so on and so forth.
How severely impeded are the issues relating to women's access to justice in the country?
Well, these are national issues. I say national because when you consider East, West, North, and South, we have now over 16 tribes. And then there are marriages based on different customary laws. And there are also marriages based on Islamic and general law. But at the same time, when we go into these relationships, the question is, what are you going into that relationship for? What do you want? What are you asking for? Are you able to give back? Are you able to treat your partner the way you want your partner to treat you? Are you looking at trying to be crowned a king in a house where you have a woman who is looking for democracy? So there are all these pitfalls. This is why you see the courts continue to be full. In fact, in some of the jails, we have women for crimes of passion, in which maybe repeated rapes. The woman is tired, the woman takes a knife and guts the husband inside out. And so you have, this is why as Legal Aid Board, we also have community advisory bureaus. In the communities, we try to establish, train local people to be able to mend disputes regarding their communities. Because these things, they contribute a lot to development. If somebody gets up in the morning and your home is not in order, if you go to the office, you're not going to be productive. If you go anywhere, you're not going to give of your best because your fundamentals are not in place. So we should not ignore this. And these are some of the things the Legal Aid Board has been doing until this year, May 15th, it will be our 10th anniversary. And we're going to celebrate it big.
All right.
And we're going to be coming to AYV. We're going to be coming to all the stations. We hope we'll do a football match with you and so many people. We're going to have to do of course, the town hall meetings are going to take place. We're going to make sure that we are able to do a float parade. We are going to do so many things, and even up country in the regions, they are also going to celebrate legal aid, because we have taken so many people out of jails. We now carry the criminal high court, and I am very proud to say, when somebody says, "At the Keigo legal aid," you see the person sits up, and it is beautiful, because this is one of the outcomes of the TRC, that people took up to arms because they said there was no justice, and that Sierra Leone needs to have an institution which should sit in the heart of the justice sector, which should provide legal aid to low-income Sierra Leoneans. And when legal aid started 10 years ago, everybody was like, will this scheme stay? Would it be viable? Would you, is this not a prank? Because how could you have free lawyers who are there for poor people? Where you go, you don't pay. Poor man lawyer. And where you have quality legal aid, where they don't sell your case, where they make sure they are with you till finality. If you are going to jail, you fully well know that, yes, I deserve to go to jail. If you are going back to your community, you fully well know, I was hard. My witnesses were hard. So we are now in all 16 districts, and we are even at some chiefdom level.
We'll
so
see.
This is, we're coming big, big.
We'll continue to assure legally the platform to, of course, CDA to propel their operations and activities.
Yes, but just Professor Njai is actually online, and he is trying to round off to get to another meeting. Now, my final question to you would be, we all know that, yes, there is a direct link between gender equality and, of course, national development. Now, if women in Sierra Leone and Africa, if they could get an access to equal opportunities, how do you see our country and the continent faring on?
Will fare on very well. I think we need women in leadership. We need women taking on some of our most important things. For instance, as I said again, we have to contextualize women's issues based on, first we have to go back, instead of just addressing symptoms, talking about what we are seeing now, these men beating women, all those things. We really have to go back and look at root cause analysis and go back from understanding women from our pre-colonial traditional Africa to the current state of where and how did things collapse along the way? Why are some things more prevalent now? For instance, we really have to look at how were women treated, because you see, much of the times we mistake patriarchy that was impinged on some of the African cultures that are mostly matriarchal. We confuse religion, things like Christianity, Islam, and Western education, Western colonialism, all of them impinging patriarchy on the African cultures that were traditionally matriarchal in nature. Most of African cultures, 90 or more %, are based on matriarchy. Now make we go to we uncle then to we mama for Mutinsef. And a lot of the things we cultures respected the value that the woman played. And so if we go back, for instance, we understand, let's say water. Water is critical. It's a critical component for women, and women should control that. Can't we give them that? They can lead better in managing our water resources. They can lead better if we androgenize our biodiversity, our forests, our things. Women are able to conserve our forests better, and that's why today we still enjoy some of the things we see. But when men came, men just ravaged them. We deforest, we go for timber, and so, and that started with the British. The colonialism was mostly men dominated. That is what you are seeing today, even in America, with Trump and others coming, is masculinity, strong man. That strong man is something we learned from colonialism. In the same way, our systems have not decolonized to get away from that. So we still keep making the West as a standard. And the West is a very bad standard of gender empowerment. There is nothing like gender empowerment in European systems and in American systems. Women were inhibited in America up to the 60s. In Europe, women were highly inhibited. In Sierra Leone, we've had the Maria Masankos in Freetown. They've been powerful Timni women here in Freetown who've led businesses during British colonial period. You've had the Madame Yokos who became powerful in Sierra Leone. You've had the Queen Masariko, Queen Simbakwe, who led the money invasion. Powerful women. This is sort of what we need to kind of understand, that the empowerment issues that we are now dealing with today is as a result of some of the structural issues and failures of successive government from independence, that we've not been able to provide water, electricity, light, health care, education, and everything, and access for everyone. And we've gone through a country of stress, from war to Ebola to daily structural violence. That in itself creates a mental stress and violence and increases the number of cases that Madam Fatimata will see at legal aid. If people are waking up every morning with structural violence, you cannot feed, you cannot eat. For a man, it is an ego issue. Now you don't have it. I don't have it. My children, I cannot control them. They are going out. They are all over the place. They are the ones now bringing things into the house. You create these issues. It's systemic trauma, and that leads to violence. So gender is, there is intersectionality with mental health, with stress, and daily structural violence we face because of successive failures of each and every government in this country from 1960 to currently. And so when we are addressing these issues, we must also think about how do we bring in and empower women who are going to lead us and correct some of these historic wrongs, correct some of these inequities without being also brainwashed into this and compromised into this status quos that have been our body politics since independence. And that's the discussion that has to happen. All of these celebrations, these slogans, these holidays, all of this ends in social media. The woman in Hailaun, the woman who is in Kabbalah in Kwenadugu, the woman in Pujehun, working every day to pay school fees, to take care of their kids, to go to college, to go to school, dealing with health issues, dealing with chronic infectious diseases, dealing with back pain from agriculture, dealing with head and neck pain from carrying water. That woman is not on social media. That woman is not posting anything. That woman is empowered and doing things and against the odds that are against her. And that's what we need to address. We need to move from this talk, slogans, capitalist kind of things to market more to more people, gender empowerment, young girls in school. This is all capitalism ploy. Nothing is done. They create markets. They create events and celebrations. They create Women's Day.
But again,
Professor
Njai, quickly from our Facebook page, someone is asking a question. Hussam Konsi says, Professor Njai, if the people of Sierra Leone decide to make you their president, what will be the first burning issue Sierra Leoneans are faced with that you will address?
The first burning issue, we have to feed ourselves. We feed ourselves, we make sure we have enough food, we are self-reliant with food. Every food that we have in this country, Sierra Leone, should be a food that we can eat as much and then even export it and able to value add to it, end-to-end processing it. Once we solve that food problem, you solve most of the health problem. Most of the maternal and child mortality issues we face is as a result of malnutrition. It's a result of anemia in women, having low blood and all that, so coming from lack of iron, lack of food. When you solve it, children are able to have the right mental cycles, the ability to go to school and being focused. And also if somebody says they are going to cut aid to us, they are not going to send us anything again, we are still food. We can feed ourselves. We are okay. We can survive. But when you depend on others for your stomach infrastructure, for them to feed you, then that is something you cannot survive. And the second and most important thing is our mental infrastructure. We have to be able to control our ideas, and that means strengthening and decolonizing our universities and institutions so that we are creating the best minds that can lead us in entrepreneurship, in leadership, and creating and producing the things we have. Because that's where it is. The mental infrastructure we have to control, and the stomach infrastructure. Currently, we are dependent on that. We are dependent on others to feed us. We are dependent on others for ideas. And that is very, very bad, because we are just here, we are going to school, we are getting all these degrees, but others are providing the ideas for how we govern ourselves, ideas on how we feed ourselves, ideas on our gender, even our gender issues, GIWI Act, all these acts, all this stuff. I don't go for those. They are all things that are coming from outside, and people just come and then we just add some things to it. We are not contextualizing it to our own context. And that's where our universities, our schools, our institutions, even outside of schools, the traditional institutions, the indigenous-based knowledge systems, all of these have to be empowered. Okay. This is what Rwanda is doing.
Thank you so very much.
This is what, when you look at their legal system, how they deal with genocide, they decided to go out of the legal court systems. They went to their traditional systems, which worked better for Rwanda in terms of reconciliation. We have to begin to really get out of the box, because when we say we are thinking out of the box and we are still inside the box, we are not thinking. And
thank you so very much, Professor Alhaji Njai, for those brilliant submissions. Thank you so very much. Still in the studios, we have Madam Hansils and Bami, who is coming from the Ministry of Social Welfare. We've had tons of messages on our Facebook page, but quickly before we go through those messages, Madam Hansils, there still seem a lot of legal, should I say, loopholes in areas of women's rights, particularly so on issues having to do with land, among other things, which men will say seem to have been compromised on the basis of, say, development. How do you think such could be addressed in Sierra Leone?
Well, in Sierra Leone, to begin with, the land tenure system is a very troublesome one. In the city and some towns, you can have individual landholding. Means like you can buy a property in the western area, there'll be a conveyance, and that will be in your name. But up country, it is different. Up country, a lease is better than a freehold. If you go to the east and south, there, land is owned and vested in the paramount chiefs, family heads. And if you go there, you want to buy land, they will advise you, this land is not for sale. Because if you look, the land may belong to families. You will say it belongs to the Sambas, the Banyas, the Kailondos, the this and that. And family in, family out, they have family heads who control that land. So in that kind of situation, if a wife marries one of them, one of their own relatives, and they cut a piece of land, they give the man and the woman, they are on that land, they have children. In time to come, the man passes away, the wife is there, The land does not belong to the wife. If the wife gets along with the relatives, fine. She will stay there, her children will continue to stay there. But in a lot of instances where you have greedy and grabby relatives, definitely they are going to try to edge the woman out to say, this land is family land. And I'm sure you also hear it, even in the Western area. Take yours, give away land. So in that kind of instance, the woman virtually will not have an opportunity to inherit land. In the Western area also, she has that opportunity. But a lot of times, you have relatives who also come, and this is why legal aid board offices are full, who try one way or another to take land away from women because maybe they are poor or they are not well educated or maybe the person is sick, etc., etc. Okay. And that again speaks volumes for businesses. If you don't have land, how could you take a collateral to a bank for them to loan you if you're doing business? So some of these things, they need to change if Sierra Leone needs to develop. Land needs to be equitably distributed. If you can own land in the Western area, you should be also able to own land up country. And this is why you see there is not a lot of investors going up country. Because if you go there, they tell you a 99-year-old lease is better than a freehold. Then you should well be aware that you cannot go into putting very expensive structures on that land or doing business on that land. Because at any time there is a breakdown between the landowners, I am sure you hear when they say, even in the mining areas, the landowners' rights, the landowners. Okay. Wherever you go, the landowners. They are not saying the landowner. They are saying the landowners. So you see the catch. And women cannot own those lands. In most of them, they are vested in male relatives. So if the Western area is the only place where people can develop, to an extent people try to say, well, you can own land in Bo, you can own land in Kenema, you can own land in Makeni. But even those, they are all up country. If you are strictly saying so going to the law to implement the law, you will realize that even those lands do not primarily belong to maybe one person trying to sell. So land is a very, very, very scarce commodity in Sierra Leone. Even though we have so much land, we don't have land.
Okay.
All right, I want to say thank you very much, Madam Hansels, for gracing the program this morning, and also to you, Bami. Well, you're still watching Wake Up Sierra Leone here on AYV. We'll be back after this break.